So I sat down to record my Saturday's video, but got a little bit distracted by the fact that Behavior have now released the developer update that I know a lot of us have been waiting for, and that is the one that pertains to the Mori changes that they mentioned earlier this year. So I thought it would be like a good idea just to kind of sit down with you guys and talk about what's changed in case you don't want to read all of this, or you just, you want a YouTuber to break it down for you so you don't have to do the effort yourself, basically. So this is the update. I will leave a link to it in the description if you want to watch it. It was literally, if you want to read it, sorry. And it concerns what they call the finishing Mori. I think this is like a new title that they're going to have for it now, the finishing Mori. They start by like just talking about the Moris and, like what they've been used for and all that kind of stuff. And interestingly, and this is something I'm going to talk about in a second, they say, moreover, Moris have garnered a somewhat negative reputation over the years. We're going to talk about that in a little second because I think it's part of why I'm not happy about this. They say that in the next PTB, which will be releasing on Tuesday, the 27th of September, I believe, they say next week, this feature will be going live and we'll get to test it. Now, the features that we have coming in, first of all, is something called Last Standing. So when all of the survivors, are dead, dying, hooked, or have escaped, you become the last standing. And basically, this is like a moment in the game where it becomes a little bit more of a battle between the last survivor and the killer. So both killer and survivor get a wider field of view. I assume on killer side, that's going to be like Shadowborn. I don't know how that's going to affect survivor. Might be interesting to see that, like how the like a widened field of view will affect a third person like viewpoint, essentially, because it's not something we've ever seen before. So it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. And Last Standing will basically be active until either one, another survivor is picked up. So say if you've got a survivor slugged and a survivor up, if the first survivor gets picked up, or as we'll find out in a minute, picks themselves up, the Last Standing effects will end, or the final survivor is downed, which will then trigger the finishing Mori. Both the survivor and the killer will be moved to a preset point on the map, free of any obstructions that may get in the way, and the killer's Mori animation will begin. My guess is that might be in basement. Basement seems like a pretty standard, pretty nice place for the killer to kind of enact their finishing Mori, but that hasn't been announced yet. That might differ map to map, but my guess is it will be the basement. Any survivors still in the trial will be killed by the entity and treated like a sacrifice. So from what I understand of this, that means that if like 3 people are on the floor and you're chasing the 4th person, you manage to down that 4th person within a set time frame, which we'll talk about in a second, everyone dies. That's interesting. Now, then they go on to talk about hope is not lost. And they say, with this new system in place, leaving survivors on the floor, aka slugging, may seem more appealing, opening the possibility of ending the match early, which is, absolutely right. If this was just how it was going to be, everybody would just be slugging survivors left, right, and center, and Unbreakable would become the new meta perk that everybody runs without a shadow of a doubt. However, they are actually countering this by making Unbreakable base kit. Now, before we move on to what this is going to entail, I do want to apologize to the latest TTV that I featured in my most recent Toxic TTV video, because in that, he said, oh, we should just make Unbreakable base kit, and I kind of laughed at the idea. Turns out you just had an inside track, my guy, so I apologize for that one. Big brain over there, I guess. So, after being left on the ground for 45 seconds, survivors will now gain the ability to pick themselves up without the need of any perks. Unbreakable is base kit. They do go on to say that like the perks that you normally use to pick yourself up, like Unbreakable, Soul Guard, No Mither, and Boon Exponential, that ability will now be removed, and they will just act mainly as like a way to increase the speed of which you pick yourself up. So, for example, they specifically mentioned that Unbreakable will now increase the dying self-recovery speed by 80, 90, and 100%. They haven't specifically mentioned what the changes are going to be to Soul Guard, No Mither, and Boon Exponential. But I think the most interesting one about all of those is No Mither. Like, why, you're just going to be injured and then have a recovery speed that's faster? Because that's essentially Unbreakable with a nerf. I don't understand what they're going to do with No Mither, and I think that's going to be the most interesting change to see going forward, because no one's going to run that. If it's just you being injured for the whole match with no additional benefits, like, yeah, the sound of you panting away is going to be nullified, but is that worth it? Probably not. And then on the killer side, the ability to Mori survivors has now been removed from Rancor and Hex Devour Hope. So Rancor works in a similar way, but instead of being able to Mori people, you can now just one-shot down them, which, if they're on Death Hook, maybe that works. You don't have as much reason to leave the obsession until right at the end. If you're running Rancor, I guess, you do still target them throughout the game. And then Devour Hope, once 5 tokens have been earned, any survivor placed on the hook is instantly sacrificed. Basically the exact same thing, but you don't get a cool animation to round out your hard work. And then the offerings themselves, they've been changed to just add blood points in if you use a finishing Mori. Basically pointless. I don't see anybody running these, to be honest. And now it's like there's no point in running any offerings on the killer side anymore. Despite the fact that all of this is coming in the PTB next week, they've actually said that it will not be coming into the game for a while. It's not going to come in like the next chapter update as we're used to with the PTB. So while we'll get to test it next week, it's not actually going to come into effect on the game for another couple of chapter updates. Now, in terms of my thoughts on this, honestly, I'm really disappointed. And the reason why is just because I feel like Moris were a really nice way to reward the individual chases and kind of the individual little competition you had with each survivor, essentially. You know, sometimes you get one Mori per game. And that was nice because it was like, okay, well, I beat that survivor at least. You know, that was like a nice little reward. To make it a reward for finishing the game, for essentially winning the game as killer, it feels like it's like a nerfed reward, essentially. Like, I don't like it. You know, I like the fact that you could have 4 Moris per game. I like the fact that you could run Devour Hope and work to get a 4 Mori game, or you could run an offering and you could work to get a 4 Mori game. You know, that was a nice kind of thing to aim for as killer. And now that you've kind of taken that away, that's one less thing that we can aim for as killer. And I don't see the point in it. I want to come back to the sentence that they put in the beginning of the developer update. Moreover, Moris have garnered a somewhat negative reputation over the years, being used out of spite against a particular survivor. I'm going to say now, this is just bitching survivors. This is literally behavior, listening to people bitching about Moris. And it annoys me. It pisses me off because what's the difference between being on Death Hook and getting Mori'd versus being on Death Hook and getting hooked? Like, yeah, it removes the ability of like DS and flashlight saves and wiggling off hook and all that kind of stuff. But how often does that actually happen? It's very few. Now that we've got just, you kind of get put on hook, you know, it sucks. When a new killer is released, one of the things that everybody is so excited to see is their Mori. The fact that you've now made it harder to attain that is just such a misstep, in my opinion. Honestly, I feel like this is just, it's not going to like affect anything gameplay wise, in all honesty. I think the slugging thing is interesting. We'll come on to that in a second. But in terms of like the gameplay experience, this finishing Mori won't necessarily affect anything. If anything, it will just make it a bit more boring. Like, you can't kind of break it up with the 4 Moris, which was a nice thing to do. And now you've just got it at the end of the game. It kind of feels like, oh, well, you know, it's one less fun thing for the killer to do, in my opinion. In terms of the slugging aspect, I honestly, I think that's going to be a really negative effect for the killer's experience. Because, like, people in my Discord have already been talking about it and worked it out. And somebody reckons that with the right perks added on, like Unbreakable and Boon Exponential, you could pick yourself up in 10 seconds. From 45 seconds down to 10 seconds. You could use Power Struggle in 3 seconds. You know, all those kind of things. That's a significant time frame taken down. And my prediction for how this is going to affect the game is one, I think Lightborn is going to become 100% base kit for most survivors. Not literally base kit as in they're going to make it for killers, obviously, but every single killer will run Lightborn, in my opinion, because you're no longer going to be able to kind of tactically slug people. You know, you're not going to be able to slug somebody and then leave them there to put pressure on the team because they can just pick themselves back up. That's not even really a problem anymore. And you're not going to be able to like down someone, and if you hear someone with a flashlight in the area, go and try and like chase them away comfortably, knowing that you can then come back and pick up that survivor still. You know now that you have a timer going down, and if you don't know what perks they're running, that could be 10 seconds. And if you think about how long 10 seconds is in the chase, it's fuck all time. Like, there's no time in that whatsoever. So that is going to be really difficult, I think, for killers to kind of deal with. And honestly, I think you're just going to increase the sweatiness of killers in terms of how they play. Because another thing which I can predict is a Starstruck nurse hooking someone and then downing the rest of the 3 survivors within the 45-second time frame and ending the game. Theoretically, a good nurse can now end the game in a minute and a half. That's my prediction. Don't know if it's obviously going to come into reality. We're going to test all of this on the PTB next week on my stream, so check me out on Twitch if you haven't already. A link will be in the description. But I'm really interested to hear your thoughts as well. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. I personally think it's stupid. I don't think the Moris needed changing, and I think, you know, with all of the other issues that we have in the game, for example, they have not once mentioned cheaters or hackers during this whole developer update, which I feel like would have been a really nice moment to just put a little paragraph in at the bottom like, hey, we know you guys are worried about this. We're going to be looking into it. But no, they've instead gone, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to fuck up your Moris. Cool behavior. Thanks for that. Really good stuff. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as usual, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye for now.
So let me break it all down for you. I ain't never giving up. I ain't never giving up. I'm taking that